Good day, everyone. I hope you are all doing fine today. Before we proceed to our discussion, please allow me to introduce ourselves. I am Dayan Bernasor, and together with Mr. Aaron, Miss Absalon, Mr. Bore, Miss Cañeda, and Miss Delig, we will be tackling Lesson 1 of Chapter 1 entitled From Listening as Comprehension to Listening as Acquisition. How to Teach and Assess Listening Skill. This chapter focuses on listening not just as something we do every day, but as a complex and important part of language learning. And we will begin with the basic concepts of listening, the difference between hearing and listening, and then go deeper into active listening and how it contributes to effective communication. Now, before we start with lesson one, let's first take a look at our learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, we, especially as future teachers, should be able to first identify key concepts of listening, including the listening process and listening comprehension. Second, discuss techniques and strategies that are effective for teaching and assessing listening. Third, choose the right types of listening and viewing activities based on learners' genders, needs, strengths, interests, and experiences. Fourth, demonstrate how to give timely, accurate, and helpful feedback to students to improve their performance in listening tasks. And lastly, create a learning plan that aligns with the English curriculum and is based on research backed knowledge and strategies in teaching listening. Now let's move to lesson 1, which focuses on the concept and importance of listening. Our group will only focus on this first lesson. Lessons 2 and 3 will be discussed by groups 2 and 3 respectively. I apologize now for any background noises that you may hear. So, to begin, let me ask you, what do you know about listening? And how is it different from hearing? Maybe you have heard the phrase, you heard me, but you didn't listen. This common line already tells us that these two things are not exactly the same. We often think hearing and listening mean the same thing, but actually, they are very different. Hearing is passive, it just happens. Listening, on the other hand, is active. It requires effort and attention. Let's look at the basic definitions. Okay, according to the dictionary, hearing is the process, function, or power of perceiving a sound. Meanwhile, listening is to hear something with thoughtful attention. This means that hearing is just about noticing sound, it's automatic. But listening involves thinking and focusing on what you are hearing. In the book, Stand Up, Speak Out, The Practice and Ethics of Public Speaking, hearing is described as an accidental and automatic brain response to sound. It requires no effort. But listening is different. It is it is purposeful and focused. When we listen, we are trying to understand the meaning behind what someone is saying. So again, hearing is automatic, but listening needs concentration. Now let's look at what the other experts have to say about hearing and listening. So Klein in 1996 gave a short but powerful explanation. Hearing is simply receiving sound, and listening is attaching meaning to that sound. Rost in 2002 explained that
Hearing is a form of perception, it's what our senses do. But listening is an active and intentional process. The difference is in the amount of effort and purpose we put into it. So we can say that everyone can hear, but not everyone really listens. Now, Van der Grift in 1999, as cited in Yildirim 2016, said that listening is not just one step, okay? It's a complex and an active process. And let's break that down. So, when we listen, we must separate different sounds, understand the words and grammar, and then recognize tone and stress, remember what we just heard, and connect everything we hear to what's going on socially or culturally. So it's not just about hearing words, it's about making sense of them in real situations. There are more definitions. So, according to Maureen in 2017, they also gave a clear difference. Hearing is simply noticing sound with your ears, while listening is understanding what that sound means. Serby also added that hearing is natural and that we are born with it, while listening is a learned skill. We have to practice it to get better. So, while hearing is something your body does, listening is something your mind has to work on. And there's a quote that says, hearing is through the ears, but listening is through the mind and the heart. This reminds us that listening is not only a physical activity, it's emotional and mental too. It involves how we feel, what we know, and what we are trying to understand. And did you know that listening is the first language skill we develop as humans? Flowerdew and Miller in 2005 said that most children are born with the ability to hear, but they start their language learning journey by listening first. Then they learn to speak, then read, and finally they learn to write. This shows that listening is the foundation of all the other language skills. And Lunstein in 1979 also emphasized this point. So, to summarize what we have learned so far, listening is much more than hearing sounds or words. It is an active process where we receive information, make sense of it, and respond to both words and actions, or verbal and nonverbal cues. Sadiko in 2015 described listening as a state of receptivity. That means it is a condition where we are open to understanding. It makes us partners in the communication process, not just observers. And listening matters because it is an important part of communication. That's why it's so important to develop our listening skills. When we listen, we pick up sounds and ideas. We also find the important words and we connect what we're hearing with what we already know. A good listener doesn't just hear, they understand and they respond properly. But now the big question is, how can we become active listeners? So let's take a look at active listening in real life. In both face to face and online conversations, people show that they are listening by saying things like okay, uh huh, or oh, or they can nod their heads and also use zoom emojis or reaction buttons, as well as asking questions or joining the discussion. All of these actions show that Listening is not passive, it is active. According to Lindsley and Knight in 2006 and Littlewood in 1981, when a listener uses their knowledge, responds to the speaker, asks and answers questions, then that listener is practicing active listening. Anderson and Lynch in 2003 also explained that understanding doesn't just come from the speaker. The listener also has to connect the new information to what they already know and try to understand the message that the speaker is sharing. Even though we have talked about how listening is active, not all listening is active. Okay? Sometimes people just hear but do not respond. That's called passive listening. Active listening is a skill. It doesn't always come naturally. It takes practice and effort. Passive listening is when a person hears something that doesn't respond or interact. Think about a long lecture on Google Meet. The teacher keeps talking, but the student doesn't click emojis, doesn't ask questions in the chat, doesn't raise a hand to participate. That's passive listening. The student might not be doing anything else, but they're also not really engaged in the conversation. Now, let's define active listening clearly. Active listening means paying attention to the speaker, noticing both verbal and nonverbal messages, responding and providing feedback, understanding and processing what is being said, and reacting appropriately depending on the context. It helps us gain information, learn new things, and communicate effectively. That's why active listening is the key to successful communication. And that concludes my part. The following topics will be presented by Mr. Bore. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about the importance of active listening and how listening helps us learn, understand, and connect. So why is active listening important? It is important especially in learning and communication where active listening means really focusing on the speaker to understand, not just hearing the words. Why active listening matters? So why does it matter? First, it helps us learn and grow. We understand the world, people, values better with active listening. For example, when you listen carefully to someone with a different from a different culture, you can learn about their values or way of life even when they don't explain it directly. When you just listen carefully from them. Active listening matters because it is also important in our school and everyday life, where we get most of our info by listening. In school and everyday life, this is where we get most of what we learn, the lectures, the instructions, the stories, which came from listening. And if we don't listen or if we tune out from the instructions or stories or lectures, we miss a lot. Language in learning. Listening is also a main way to take in a new language. By listening, it helps us understand how the language works. Imagine when you're learning English and you hear someone, how's it going instead of how are you. By listening, you learn the natural, which the book or the textbook might not teach. And by listening, it will also support the speaking and writing skills, where it builds the base for using the language well. Diba? When you listen more, your speaking and writing will get better too because you will know how the sentences are put together. Listening ELT classroom. In English learning, listening is half of the work according to Noonan in 1998. 50% of language uses listening, and Ross said listening helps us in key ways in 1994. First, it gives learners the important input. Yes, according to Ross, the listening will give learners the input that they need, like how the grammar is used in real-world conversations. Second, it helps with the interaction in real-world language. According to Ross, it will help with interaction. For example, in a group work, if the student listen well, they will respond better. Third, it shows native speakers talk. According to Ross, it also teaches vocabulary. Like if you hear awesome used again and again, you might figure out what it means from the context. And lastly, teaches new words and grammars. This is according to Ross in 1994. Barriers to listening. Listening isn't always easy. There are also barriers to it. First is the noise. Noise is a loud sounds, thoughts, or confusion. Yes, noise can be a barrier to listening. Noise can be an issue, like when you're trying to focus in a busy cafe where a loud sounds comes anywhere. Attention span. Attention span is when you are hard to focus for a long time. Yes, sometimes your attention span fades. You start thinking about lunch instead of a lesson. That's funny. Next is biases. Biases is also a barrier to listening, where you are judging the speaker too quickly. Like when you assume someone isn't worth listening just because of how they speak. That is also a barrier. And finally, last is apprehension. When you worry about not understanding. Some learners worry when they don't understand, so they give up trying. This is the 4 barriers to listening. Active listening skills. To become better listeners, here are big skills. First is pay attention. Focus on the speaker and their body language. Do not interrupt. You should look at the speaker, watch their body language. Do not check your phone or look around. For example, in class, if your teacher is explaining a new word, your focus helps you remember it. Second skill is withhold judgment. Be open-minded and listen carefully before you react or disagree. Withhold judgment meaning don't jump into conclusion or interrupt. Maybe someone has an idea and you disagree with, or you try to fully hear them out first before you say something, and you might learn something new. That is the active listening skills. Thank you for listening, and I hope you are doing it actively.
Good day, everyone. I am Laika Lorraine P. Cañeda, and today I'll be continuing the discussion about the active skills in learning. So the third one is the reflect. So reflecting during communication means rephrasing and repeating the speaker's words and emotion to better understand their experiences. So when we say reflecting, no, we don't mean it by looking just in a mirror, okay? What we mean here is repeating or rephrasing what the other person is saying, including how they're feeling. It's like you're holding up a mirror to their words and emotions so they can see and understand themselves better. So, for example, like imagine your friend says that I'm really nervous about the math test. So, if you respond with, so you're feeling a bit anxious about the test, it means that you are reflecting. You're showing them that you hear them and you get how they're feeling. And there are 3 main reasons why we reflect during communication. No, first is to help the speaker hear their own thoughts. Okay, sometimes when we say things out loud and someone reflects them back to us, it helps us realize what we're really feeling or thinking. The second one is the speaker, to show the speaker that you're trying to understand their point of view. So this builds trust, no? It lets them know that you're not just hearing the words, but you're actually listening to understand. And lastly is to encourage them to continue talking. Because when someone knows that you're listening and they feel understood, they'll usually want to keep opening up. So that's super important in good communication. So always remember that reflecting isn't about giving advice, solving a problem, or talking about yourself. It's about listening closely and then gently repeating or rewording what the person said so they feel heard and supported. So the next is clarity. In active listening, feedback is key. To give accurate feedback, listeners should clarify unclear points or ask for more details. Phrases like, "What do you mean by?" or "So you mean that?" help ensure understanding and allow the speaker to correct or add information. Use this technique to grasp the full text of the message. So the next part of the active listening is clarity. This just means that making sure you really understand what the other person is trying to say. Because when you're actively listening, giving feedback is super important, but here's the thing, okay? You can't give good feedback if you don't fully get the message, right? Like, that's where clarifying comes in. Like, let's say someone is telling you a story or explaining something, you're not totally sure what they mean. Instead of just nodding or guessing, you ask questions to make it clearer. So you can use simple phrases like, "What do you mean by that?" Or "So you mean that?" Then repeat what you think they meant. So when you do this, you're giving the speaker a chance to explain more or fix any misunderstanding. And it also shows that you're really paying attention and want to understand them fully. So in short, ang clarity is about checking if you got the message right, and it helps both people stay on the same page. So the next step is summarizing. In addition to clarifying, you can also summarize or restate key points in the conversation to ensure that you have the same understanding of the speaker's intention and message. When summarizing, the goal is not to state a fact but to clarify with the speaker whether their information and feelings have been heard correctly. And this technique also helps the speaker reflect on their own thoughts and feelings. So summarizing is when you repeat the main points of what someone said using your own words. Like, you're not just repeating everything, but rather you're picking out the important parts and saying them back to check if you got it right. So, to help to make sure that you understand the speaker's message and feelings. Second is to show the speaker that you're really listening, and last is to help them think more clearly about what they said. So, important note is that you're not trying to solve their problem or correct them, but rather you're just making sure that you understand their message. And now for the last skill, which is sharing. So active listening involves understanding and being understood by the speaker. It requires listening intently and maintaining open-mindedness to grasp their perspectives and feelings. While withholding judgment, you can still share your own ideas and feelings, doing so without imposing them. So ang active listening daw isn't just about sitting silently and nothing. Rather it's about really focusing on what the other person is saying and trying to understand their thoughts and feelings. Like, you're not just hearing words, but you are connecting with their message. And one important thing is that you're not there to judge or to argue with the speaker, but your goal is to make sure that the speaker feel heard and understood. So this means not keeping an open mind and seeing things from their point of view. But that doesn't mean no, na you can talk or share your own experiences. You can, but do it in a gentle and respectful way. Okay? It's not about turning the conversation to yourself, but adding support. So to do this is you don't interrupt. Let the speaker finish their thoughts. Second is be open. You try to understand their emotions and what they're really trying to say, and avoid judging or giving advice too fast. So if you want to share your view, okay, do it with kindness and care. Like, for example, if someone says, I don't feel like I fit in at school, so don't rush to fix it by saying, oh, that's not true. Instead, try to say that sounds really hard. Do you want to talk about what's been happening? And then if it feels right, you can say something like, I felt that way before too. What helped me was, so mag-add lang ka og mga experiences nimo. And that kind of sharing makes the other person feel supported, not shut down. So remember nga, sharing is part of listening as long as it's done with care. And now let's move to ethical listening. So ethical listening involves listening with honest intentions and respect, treating others the way you want to be treated. It's about creating a climate of mutual understanding and care as Koopman and Lull 2008 state, the creation of a climate of caring and mutual understanding and respecting others' perspectives in one hallmark of the effective listener. So, ang ethical listening daw, it means listening with honest intentions, respect, and a genuine effort to understand the other person. Like, it's about treating others how you'd want to be treated with when you are speaking. So with attention, patience, and kindness. Okay? You're not just waiting for your turn to talk, but you're really there for the other person mentally and emotionally. So according to Koopman and Lull 2008, kay, ang ethical listening daw, it involves the creation of a climate of caring and mutual understanding. And they also say nga, respecting others' perspectives is one hallmark of the effective listener. So this means na you're not only focused on what's being said, but also on how and it's being said and why it matters to the speaker. So to do this, you have to listen to understand, but not to argue or judge. Next is you have to be respectful even if you don't agree. And next is make the speaker feel safe, valued, and heard. And last is you have to keep personal biases aside and stay open-minded. Like for example, if someone says nga, I don't believe in doing things that way, and as an ethical listener responds, I see, can you help me understand your point of view? Instead of saying, well, that's wrong. So that creates a mutual respect and keeps the conversation healthy. And now let's talk about the stages of listening. So there are several factors that can interfere with listening. The Vito 2000 divides the listening process into 5 mental tasks or stages: receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating, and responding. So for the first stage, it is receiving. The first stage, it involves hearing the message and focusing on it by isolating it from other noises. The listener must attend to the sounds, interpreting them as words in context. Paying attention to the speaker and avoiding distractions ensures no information, verbal or non-verbal, is missed. So the first step in listening is receiving. So that means actually hearing the message and focusing on it. So this is where listening begins. You can't understand anything if you don't first catch what's being said. So according to the Vito 2000, this stage is about hearing the sounds clearly, second, paying attention, and lastly, separating the speaker's message from all the background noise and distractions. So It's not just about using your ears, but also it's also about using your attention. So if your mind is wandering or if you're checking your phone, okay, you might miss important parts of the message like the tone of voice or the facial expressions. Because imagine, so for example, now imagine like you're in a class and your friend is talking to you quietly. Because so if you're also listening to music or texting at the same time, you might hear their voice but not actually receive the message. So the tips to receive well, okay? First is you have to face the speaker. Like this shows that you're present and ready to listen. Second is keep an eye contact because this helps you stay focused and shows respect. Third is put away distractions like the phones, noise, or multitasking can make you miss any details. And lastly is focus fully. Listen not just to the words but also to the tone, facial expressions, and body language. Because when you receive the message clearly, Manggod, okay, you don't miss important information. And that makes the rest of the listening process easier, like understanding and remembering. It also shows the speaker that you care about what they're saying. So that's all for my part now. Next reporter, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, today I will be discussing my part, which is the four stages and the process of listening. So, I will explain it na lang po, no? So, first, we have the stage 2. So, in this stage, the listener begins to comprehend or make sense of the message receives. It involves assigning meaning to the words or and the phrases rather, and understanding the context in which the message is delivered. This is crucial because words can have different meaning depending on how and where they are used. So according to Lumen Boundless Communication, determining the context and meaning of individual words as well as assigning meaning in language is essential to understanding sentences. So a listener should be aware of various factors that can affect their understanding, such as word choice, the speaker's accents, fluency, physical noise, personal experience, and cultural background. So, for example, no, if someone says he's on fire during a basketball game, the listener needs to understand the context. It doesn't mean the person is literally burning, but rather that he's playing exceptionally well. So a helpful strategy in this stage is clarification, asking question or repeating parts of the message to make sure you understood it correctly. So for stage 3, no, so this stage is about retaining information from what you've heard. Studies shows that people forget up to 50% of what they've heard within 8 hours. So remembering is crucial because it helps in following up or responding meaningfully in a conversation. So, Edgar Dale's cone of experience shows that students retain only about 20% of what they hear. To improve memory, one should process the message meaningfully by connecting it to past experiences or knowledge. So, for examples, if someone tells you a story about their vacation in Japan and you've also been to Japan, you're more likely to remember the details because you can relate them to your own memory. So associating new information with previously stored knowledge helps in long-term retention. So that's the for the stage 3, no. So for stage 4, here the listeners judges the message are fully understanding it. Evaluation should be objective and fair, taking the speaker's context into account. So, one important strategy is to withhold judgment while the speaker is still talking, especially if the topic is sensitive or controversial. So, for example, if someone says online classes are better than face to face, your initial reaction might be disagreement, right? But evaluating means thinking about the reasons they give and comparing it with your knowledge and experience before you reacting. So here, no, each person's background influences how they evaluate information. So two people might interpret the same message differently. So the goal is to listen openly and respond thoughtfully. So for the last stages, no, so for last stage rather is so the last stage, which is the stage 5. So this is the final stage that involves giving feedback, showing that you have been listened and understood the speaker. So responses can be both verbal, just like asking questions, and the non-verbal is like nodding and smiling. So feedback happens both during and after conversation. When feedback occurs during the conversation, it is called formative feedbacks, and at the end of the conversation, it is called summative feedback. So, for example, during an online class, you might have a thumbs up reaction or type "got it" in the chat box, and at the end, you might summarize what the teacher said to show your understanding. So that's for the stage 5. So here naman, no, in the process of the listening. So listening is more than just hearing. It involves understanding and processing what is heard. So in language learning, listening has evolved from just repeating words to a deeper process that involves comprehension and interpretation. So there are two main in the process listening. So first one, bottom up processing rather. So this starts with decoding sounds and moves step by step to understanding the full message. You focus on the details like vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. So for example, hearing the sentence "she is going to market" and understanding each word each word before interpreting the full meaning. So for the second one, no, we have top-down processing. This begin with using your background knowledge and expectations rather to interpret what you're hearing. So for example, if you hear listening to a news report about a typhoon, you already expect to hear about weather warnings or evacuations or damage, which helps you make sense of the report even if you miss some of the words. So in real life, no, listening, we often use both processes together, decoding and the message, and using our prior knowledge to understanding it better. So for the process of listening, no, the stages of listening and understanding, remembering, evaluating, and responding are the most essential steps that help us engage effectively in communication. So by being aware of these stages and understanding how listening works through bottom up and top down processes, we can become rather better communicators and listening in the future. So that's it for my part. Thank you everyone for the listening.
I am Remy Dalig, and today I will be discussing the bottom-up processing and the top-down processing. First, let us discuss the bottom-up processing. When we say bottom-up processing, it is like building understanding step by step, starting with the smallest part of language like sounds, and words until we reach the full meaning. According to Hinkel 2006, the bottom-up processing is a way of listening that focuses on the small parts or pieces of language like the words, the sounds, and sentence structure to understand what someone is saying. This means that instead of first looking at the big meaning or the context, the listener starts by understanding each word or sounds and finally put them together to understand the whole message. For example, when you hear someone say, "The cat sat on the mat," with bottom-up processing, you first identify the sounds. You hear the word "the cat sat on the mat." Second, recognize each word. You know that the word cat is animal. The word sat is an action. The word on tells where, and the word mat is a small piece of cloth or carpet. And finally, you understand the sentence. By putting these words together, you get the full meaning. The cat is sitting on the mat. You focus on small parts, the sounds and words to understand the whole sentence. Next, according to Brown 2006, on the bottom-up processing, it means that when we use our knowledge of sounds, word meanings, and discourse markers like the word but, the word because, and etc., to understand what we hear. When we focus on small details like each sound and word to make sense of the whole message. For example, if you hear someone say, "She has been working hard, but she is tired," you first recognize the sounds "she has been working hard, but she is tired." Second, you understand the meaning of each word. The word working, the word hard, and the word tired. Third, you notice the discourse marker, the word but, which it shows a contrast between the working hard versus the feeling tired. And finally, you understand the full meaning of the sentence. The work hard, she worked hard but now feels tired. Next is according to Richard 2008 on bottom-up processing. Bottom-up processing is described as decoding where you break down the speech into smaller parts to understand the full message. First, you were going to focus on the sounds, then the words, then the sentence, and finally, the whole text. Example, when you hear "the cat jump over the fence," you start by recognizing the sounds of each word into the sentence, and then you recognize the words, the word cat, the word jump, the word over, and the word fence. And lastly, you understand the full meaning. The meaning of the sentence. The cat did something. What is the cat did? She jumped over an object, which is the fence. The next topic is the top-down processing. The top-down processing, it is like using your background knowledge, your ideas, or personal experiences first to help you understand what you hear. According to Yildirim 2016 on the top-down processing, it means that listener use their background knowledge and their experiences, or what we call the schemata, to understand what they hear. Instead of focusing on the sounds and words, They use what they already know to guess the meaning. For example, if you're listening to a story about a birthday party and you know what a birthday party is, you can understand the meaning of the words like the word cake or the word presents if you even if you don't know the word exactly. When we say semantic dimension, this means that our understanding of language it is based on the meaning we get from the memory and previous knowledge. When we say schemata, it is our mental or the files in our brain where we store our knowledge and experiences. In top-down processing, we can hear something new. We can connect it with what we already know. So the difference between the bottom-up and the top-down processing is that the bottom-up processing, it starts with the language, which is, again, the sounds and the words. And then after that, it ways to the meaning. It is like decoding the message step by step. While the top-down processing, it starts with the meaning, or using what we already know, and then tries to understand the word or language used. Example of top-down processing. Let's say you hear someone say, "It's my birthday today and I am so excited to have cake and presents." With top-down processing, you already know what a birthday is and that cake and presents are part of the birthday celebrations. So even if you don't know the words excited rather, you can guess the meaning based on what's usually said during a birthday. You use your prior knowledge to understand the speaker's message, starting from the meaning of a birthday and working your way to the words they use. Next is according to Lopez et al. 2020 on top-down and bottom-up processing. Again, according to Lopez, the top-down processing, it means that using what we already know to understand the meaning of what we hear. It includes our knowledge, culture, social context, and even previous experiences. We use this knowledge to interpret spoken words. Example, if someone says, "I'm going to wear my red shirt today because it's my lucky color." Your background knowledge, you know that people sometimes choose certain colors because they believe in luck. No, so this helps you understand the meaning of what the person is saying. And the bottom-up processing here is that this focuses on understanding language itself, starting the sounds, the phonetic level, the moving to words, the grammar, and finally to the full meaning. Example, if you hear "she's going to the store," you first recognize the sound "she's going to the store." Then you understand each word's meaning and finally you understand the full message. Next is according to Bach 1994 and Nihei 2002 and combining the both processes. To understand what someone is actually saying, we need to combine both type of processing. The bottom-up processing, which is focused on the phonetic sounds, the vocabulary, and the grammar. The top-down naman, it is used in context, the general knowledge, and past experiences to make sense of the message. For example, imagine that you hear someone saying the party is in the park at 5 p.m. The bottom-up process here is that you break down the sounds and understand the word party, park, and 5 p.m. The top-down processing here is that you use your knowledge of how the parties work and where parks are located to understand the situation and the timing. So by combining these two processes, you understand that the both language and the meaning of what's being said. The next topic is Skills for Listening by Field 1998 and Nihei 2002. So the skills, it refers to the abilities that help us understand the language. The native listeners naturally have these skills because they have grown up with the language. While the non-native learners, they need to develop these skills to understand the language better. I have here example. For example, for a native English speaker, listening to someone say, "It's raining cats and dogs," which means it's raining very heavily, is easy. They naturally understand the idiom because they have learned it from experience. But for a non-native speaker, understanding this idiom may be harder because they don't have the same experiences. They need to develop the skills to recognize the idioms and their meanings. We have here the following skills classification is adapted by Nihei 2002 from an article by Richard 1987. The first skill is that ability to recognize reduced form of words. So sometimes people speak quickly and shorten words. Being able to recognize the shortened words like the word gonna instead of going to, which it help you to understand what's being said. Number two is ability to distinguish word boundaries. In fast speech, words may blend together, so it is very important to be able to identify where one word ends and the next begins. Third is ability to detect keywords. These skills involves identifying important words that give you the main idea of what someone is saying even if you don't catch every word. Fourth is ability to guess the meaning of words from the context in which they occur. If you don't understand a word, you can figure out its meaning by listening to the surroundings or the situation. Fifth is ability to recognize cohesive devices and spoken discourse. This means that understanding words or phrases like the word because, the word therefore, and the word but that links the ideas together and show how they are connected. Number six is ability to distinguish between major and minor constituents. This means that knowing what the main point is in a conversation and what's just extra information. For example, the dog ate my homework and then it ran outside to play. The main point here is the dog ate my homework. The second part is extra. Number seven, we have the ability to recognize the communicative function of utterances according to situations, participants, and goals. These skills helps you to understand what someone is trying to do with their words, like making a request or giving information or offering an opinion. For example, "Can you pass me the salt?" is a request, not a question about your ability. Number eight, we have the ability to reconstruct or infer situations, goals, and participants' procedures. This means that being able to figure out the context or details of what's happening based on what you hear. For example, if you hear someone say, "The meeting has been rescheduled to 3 p.m., you can infer that there is a meeting and the time has changed. Number 9. Ability to use real-world knowledge and experience to work out purposes, goals, settings, and procedures. Now, this involves using what you already know about the word to help you understand what is being said. For example, if someone say, "We'll have to wait in line," you know they are likely at a place where people wait, like a store or a ticket counter. Number 10, ability to predict outcomes from event described. These skills help you guess what might happen next based on the information you hear. For example, if someone says, the storm is coming, you might predict that it will rain or become windy. Number 11. Ability to infer link and connections between events. This means understanding how one event leads to another and how they are related. Example, she forgot her umbrella, so she got wet. The link between the two events is that forgetting the umbrella led to getting wet. Number 12. Ability to distinguish between literal and implied meanings. You need to understand both what is said directly or literally and what is suggested or implied indirectly. For example, it's a bit cold in here. The literal meaning is that the room is cold. The implied meaning is that the speaker may want you to close the window or turn on the heat. Number 13, ability to recognize markers of coherence in discourse and to detect such relations as the main idea, supporting the idea, given information, new information, generalization, and amplification. This means that noticing how ideas are connected in a conversation, like what the main idea is and how the ideas support it. Number 14, ability to process speech containing pauses, errors, and connections. These skills help you to understand speech when people pause, make mistakes, and correct themselves. Number 15, ability to make use of facial paralinguistic and other clues to work out meanings. Okay, so sometimes facial expression rather or body language can help you understand the meaning behind what someone is saying. Number 16, the ability to adjust listening strategies to different kinds of listener purposes or goals. Now, it means that knowing how to change the way you listen depending on what you need. For example, if you're listening to a lecture, focus on the details and facts. But if you're listening to a story, you might focus more on the main plot and the characters. So, those are the 16 skills that will help people become better listeners by allowing them to understand speech in a deeper way, from hearing words to figure out meanings, connecting ideas, and using context and real world knowledge to fill in gaps. That's all for my report. I hope you learned something, and thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Johnny May J. Absalom. Today I'll be discussing the last topic, the last discussion. So this talks about the listening, to comprehend and listening to acquire the target language. So we have here the LSRW, means listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this method suggests that students learning a new language will be first taught how to listen. So this is because listening provides much rural input and data, and it enables the language learner to interact in spoken communication. To understand the nuances in a particular language, one must be able to listen. So by this method, this is a learning technique that focuses on the progressive acquisition of language abilities with listening. So this is such an essential part. So this approach is based on the concept that effective communication begins with listening. So by engaging students in rural experiences, they become mindful of the details of pronunciation, intonation, and also rhythm that make up a target language. So by listening skills, they can improve comprehension and also contextual understanding. So students are allowed to acquire grammatical structure and vocabulary smoothly. As what you have seen on the slide, SMED 1990 emphasized the importance of listening in the process of second language acquisition, or the SLA. He believes that simply being exposed to a language is necessary for effective learning. Instead, learners must actively engage with and recognize particular parts of this input. So the idea here is calls into a question of a traditional opinions that value passive language comprehension above in an active cognitive engagement. So based on him is this is the concept of noticing, which refers to a learner's perception of language features in a rural environment. So he also claims that without conscious notice, students are unlikely to absorb new vocabulary or even a grammatical structure. That's why Smith finds shows the necessity of creating circumstances in which students may interact carefully with spoken language. Likewise, Stephen Krashen input hypothesis suggests that the best methods are therefore those that supply comprehensive input in low anxiety situations, containing messages that students want to hear. So it states that language acquisition is most effective when learners are exposed to comprehensive input in low anxiety situation. And so the idea here is it emphasizes the importance of communicating messages that can be both understandable and relevant to the student's interests. So it can be leading to a more engaging learning experiences. So according to Krashen, he believes that when learners receive language input that is slightly above their present competence level, they can naturally absorb new linguistic structure by enhancing fluency and comprehension. So furthermore, the importance of low anxiety environments cannot be emphasized. However, high levels of anxiety might impair the cognitive processes that requires for language acquisition, such as attention and retention. So, teacher can improve the effectiveness of comprehensive input by fostering a supportive classroom environment in which students they can feel more comfortable when expressing themselves, and also by making errors with. Okay, as we proceed, so here the third slide, the importance of listening as a language skills has been highlighted in the studies of Ruse 2001 and Van Gergift 2011. They considered it as a critical means of acquiring the second language and a channel through which we process language in real time, since it internalizes language rules and favors the development of other language skills. So according to them, the importance of hearing, this is a component in second language acquisition. They suggest that listening is more than just a passive activity. It is an important way for students to acquire linguistic principle. By this view is consistent with the cognitive theory of language learning, which holds that active engagement with auditory inputs it promotes deeper processing and comprehension in language structure. So according to them, they argue that listening is an important linguistic structure because this is important channel for real-time language processing. The example here is the exposure to actual spoken language, which provides learners they have an opportunities to instantly comprehend meaning while fostering their capacity to respond effectively in communicative circumstances, experiences, or situation. So this real-time involvement is not only improves fluency, but it also strengthens other language abilities like speaking and reading. The K-12 curriculum guide in English has reflective listening comprehension as one of the language domains identified that students need to learn and the teachers need to teach in greater detail. In this of reasons, the K-12 guide in English must points out the importance of listening comprehension as an important language area. Thus, both learners and also teachers must effectively teach. So the emphasis on listening skills, it underlines an important aspect of language learning, understanding the comprehension that goes beyond reading and writing. So listening is essential for communication. Therefore, it presents in the curriculum where it emphasizes the needs for teachers to focus on the skills in their lesson plan and their instructional approaches. The curriculum guides framework, it defines the key competencies within the listening comprehension domain, giving educators, giving teachers with a clear plan for instruction. So by with these competencies, it covers a wide range of listening skills, including identifying major ideas, understanding surroundings, and interpreting details in spoken language. As also presented, Richards 2016 states that the view of listening is based on the assumption that the main function of listening in second language learning is to facilitate understanding of spoken discourse. He added that language teachers also need to consider how listening can provide input that triggers the further development of second language proficiency. So according to Richard, it represents a critical point of view on the importance of hearing in second language learning. So it arguing that the major goal of listening is to improve comprehension of spoken conversation. This statement emphasizes the importance of hearing as an active process by which learners interact with the specific new language. By understanding the spoken language, this is not only facilitates immediate communication, but it is also builds a basis for more advanced linguistic competencies. So it allows the students how to manage complicated interaction in that situation. So Richards, he emphasized the needs for language teachers to expand their perspective by recognizing how listening can be used as an encouragement for improving the second language ability. So teachers can provide real input to students through the incorporation of several kinds of listening activities inside in their lesson plans inside the teaching in classroom. So it's stimulating cognitive processes necessary for language development. Based on this slide, as what you have seen, so English language classroom teachers gives students a listening activity and then evaluate how well they understand what was heard according to Nemchinova 2013. Please follow the slides. So by his statement, Nemchinova 2013 rejects this technique because it says that when teacher assess students' understanding through assumptions, talks concerning significant ideas or summaries, they are just assessing listening comprehension rather than developing a more holistic development of language abilities. So this emphasis on comprehension that can mistakenly cause to students to focus on the specific words rather than understanding those bigger meanings within spoken conversation. So teachers are risked in putting off their students' progress by teaching them to exact meaning from recognizable patterns in language rather than depending only on word-for-word interpretation. So these techniques may encourage a dependence on familiar vocabulary and patterns while limiting learning about those unfamiliar aspects of language. Next, this is a additional information. Please follow the slides. So this is likely traditional listening activities that are often emphasize comprehension, understanding the meaning of spoken language. It is crucial for teachers to integrate acquisition focus practice. So according to Richard's 2008, the teachers should promote listening as a means of acquiring new words rather than simply understanding them. The change can be facilitated by specific activities like diction, clues exercises, and comparative examinations of spoken and written text. So these approaches are not only to help students recognize and recall vocabulary, syntax, phrases, but also to make it easier to bring these linguistic features in an active language use. So as Richard's stated, he points out that students must seek to incorporate new vocabulary and structures in their oral production. So teachers may significantly enhance their students' communication abilities by creating an environment in which they can practice utilizing their learned language in situation. And lastly, activities may include diction and dictocom, clues, tests, and the like. Activities will be further discussed in the next lesson. So Richards 2016 further elaborates that learners need to take part in activities that requires them to try out and experiment in using not just language forms of new learning items to become incorporated into their linguistic repertory. So, as Nemchenova 2013 suggested, that students could perform more productive activities requiring the use of target forms from the text, such as reading transcripts aloud, sentence completion, dialogue practice, and role playing. As learners work with transcripts and use the language and speaking activities, they master the forms they have heard, extending listening instruction to develop students' abilities to understand oral speech and acquire sound patterns. Vocabulary and grammar reflects the motivated nature of the listening process. So by the statement, Richards emphasized the effective learning, which requires students to participate in active activities that fosters engagement with newly acquired forms of language. So this teaching strategy is not only to improve knowledge and remembering, but this focuses on how to improve the learner's linguistic reach. Okay, so to put this theory into practice, it has a plenty of exercises that can be used to help students to understand and apply target language form. So Nova 2013 said it promotes beneficial exercises like reading transcripts aloud, phrase completion, assignments, dialogue practice, and role-playing scenarios. So by these interactive methods, it allows the students to actively connect with the subject, which strengthens their comprehension of sound patterns, vocabulary, and grammatical structure through practical application. And lastly, teachers may greatly enhance students' understanding of oral communication through extending instruction listening overall, basically comprehension to include active development. So that will be our topic for chapter 1. I hope you understand, and thank you so much for listening.